Hello, National University Virtual High School students, National University Academy students. Mr. Goyette coming to you from the Spectrum Center in San Diego. Just wanted to go over with you a few, just some of the discussion that you've had about Benjamin Franklin in Unit 2. Both William and Duncan have been discussing Franklin's comments in his letter regarding immigration, his concerns for the American future, his hopes for American industry, also his attitudes toward the Germans coming over, seeing them as an insular society, as a threat to the American future, in that they would not adapt to the English language and Anglo-European culture, seeing them in ways as darker people, as he calls them, tawnies. Now these comments, of course, were put in context of the time. I do ask that when we looked at presidents like Theodore Roosevelt, that while we will look at his carrying the book Supériorité des Anglo-Saxons, the French nonfiction work that he's reading while on his campaign at San Juan Hill, Kettle Hill in Cuba, and his actions of removing the African American soldiers from the picture after capturing Kettle Hill, San Juan Hill. You know, here's a man who believes in the superiority of the white race. You have to remember that the time period and understand, put these people in context. They were still, for their time, making steps in the right direction, dare I say. And I think, Duncan, you made some really interesting points. I think Franklin also comes off it when he says that the Paxton boys were acting as savage as the Native Americans, as the Indians. And so this shows that he's not necessarily saying that the Native Americans are to be considered of equal respect and equal potential. So yes, Will, I think your point that you made in the discussion, that you say Franklin is very closed-minded in the essay, as he wrote concerning the increase in mankind in America. He starts the essay off by giving a general idea of what kind of land is available in Europe, and so you do a good recap there. So Franklin didn't like the fact that immigrants from Ireland and Germany and from other countries in Europe were coming over to the United States. In Pennsylvania, Franklin absolutely hated the fact that the Germans were settling there and still practicing everything about their culture in Germany. Franklin's argument on that is that he didn't think it was right that they should come to America and not practice their religion, and they didn't speak English. Probably the biggest reason why Franklin didn't like the Germans not converting in Pennsylvania was because Pennsylvania was established by an Englishman, William Penn. Of course, we'll talk about the Quakers at a later time. And then, Duncan, you replied, I don't think Franklin was as racist as you suggest. He wanted to end slavery. He wanted to punish people who committed hate crimes against racial groups. He helped write and wholeheartedly supported the ideas of the Declaration of Independence. Just because he thought white people were pretty, you say, doesn't mean he didn't support equal rights for all. He was an amazing person whose ideas were ahead of its time. Now, I want to actually agree with Duncan, but also caution Duncan here. I want you to think about some of the other arguments that are going on. I do agree that Franklin was one of the greatest leaders in American history. I'm going to read from Parrington's The Colonial Mind. I don't even know if I'm still on camera. Let me hold on here. Bingo. And let me just read that to you quickly. Benjamin Franklin, our first ambassador, page 166. There was a singularly dramatic fitness in the life and career of Benjamin Franklin. America has never been more worthily represented at old world capitals than by this unpretentious commoner, drawn from the stock of the plain people. A plebeian in an aristocratic age, he was nevertheless, by common consent, first among colonial Americans in qualities of mind and heart. A wit and philosopher, rich in learning, charming in manners, ripe in the wisdom of the world, resourceful in dealing with men and servants, he was one of the most delightful, as he was one of the greatest men produced by the English race in the 18th century. Figure to yourself, he wrote in his 72nd year, an old man with gray hair appearing under the marten fur cap among the powdered heads of Paris. It is this odd figure that salutes you with handfuls of blessings. An odd figure indeed in such a setting, but a figure that captured the imagination of Paris as it has since captured the imagination of America. So novel as to seem romantic, a charming rustic philosopher who might have stepped out of the pages of Rousseau. And so the French aristocracy patronized by le bonhomme and laughed with him at the affections of his preposterous world and made much of him for the zest that it discovered in the novel sensation. It was the same odd figure that had stood at the bar of the House of Commons and matched his intelligence against the celebrated English lawyers, the same figure that had been called to counsel by the great Pitt, who thought himself too great to learn anything from Franklin, that had been lashed by the scurrilous tongue of Waterburn, and had seen 1,000 bribes dangled before him by Lord Howe and other gentlemen, a figure that seems strangely out of place in the old-fashioned Tory world with its narrow sympathies and narrower intelligence. So, of course, Parrington here gives a lot of credit to Franklin as being a positive moving force. I think a lot of the positive ground he makes is not so much in, we really can't take the steps that we take, the United States takes and other societies take in looking at race relations yet, because so much of Anglo-European society is founded in those opinions of superiority at that time. It's not in history any race at the time that's ruling sees itself as superior to all others. So racism isn't invented by any one race. It is clear that the Egyptians thought themselves superior. The Nubians thought themselves superior to all of the races in their times, and their literature shows that they were thought of themselves so vastly superior that they also thought other peoples as savages. So this isn't necessarily a trend of race, of one race, so much as once a society or a group that is ethnically identified reaches a certain level of economic superiority over its neighbors, they begin to see them as savages or less than themselves. So this is not something that is unique to Anglo-Europeans or any one race. So Franklin here is really making grounds on class issues. He's saying that people have the right, men have the right to vote. We're not to women yet in the United States, 1920, that's coming later. But he's saying at least men who are not the landed gentry, who are not the aristocracy, have the right to vote, participate in politics. And for the time, that's about as good as it's going to get. The United States still has to break down some barriers, as do other countries, with regard to race, religion, creed, ethnicity, race. And that will come later. So putting those comments about Franklin in context, excellent job, Will. Excellent job, Duncan, for bringing the substantive aspects of it to the discussion board. I'm liking the fact that you're both questioning each other's positions and not just agreeing. You will receive no credit by saying I agree, unless of course you back up specifically why you agree or disagree with another student. So I'm glad I'm seeing that on the discussion board. Keep up the good work, and I will talk to you both in class and online.